Okay, so here we go. We've done two, and those were both bourbon aged. I suppose you'd say, what was the term you've been using? Extreme beers.
Yeah, but I think better put so far are barley wine class beers.
Barley wine.
One was a stout, one was an imperial brown. Now we're going to move into Imperial IPA. So you kind of get a theme here. You can take just about any style in brewing.
You're feeling imperial.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know if that's it. It just means strong. So we can take any style, increase the amount of malt we're using, and get the sugars up to the point where we'll get a more wine-like alcohol level.
So this is Double Jack, which is, a offshoot of your Union Jack, but double the Jack, right?
So this is where we really bring hops into the mix, and I think that, you don't even have to get it up to your nose. Start smelling it.
Overpowering those now. Almost.
Yeah. So obviously, hops have nothing to do with alcoholic strength. They have everything to do with flavor, bitterness, and aroma. And
now I've got to think, okay, and I'm going to upset the brewy guys now maybe a little bit, but I'm not going to say this beer, but beers like this in general are going a bit over the top with the hops. I mean, it's so much and it's so intense. It's almost like a challenge, right? It's like eating a jalapeno, if you will.
No, you nailed it. And yeah, so it's almost like there's a bitterness race. There's this.
It's a competition almost. I mean, I had a double IPA somewhere I can't remember which one it was, but it was just incredible. It was too much. This has a balance to it, obviously. I mean, it's almost too much, but not quite. It's too much for me, perhaps, but I get it. And I think some people have taken it too far, and it's almost undrinkable at that point. Say, okay, yeah, you've used more hops than the next guy.
Yeah, I believe the challenge more is if you're going to go this intense, then somehow create drinkability and balance within that intensity level.
It's the same as a wine. It's creating balance. You use all the oak and the power you want, but if it falls out of balance, then you lose it. And I think you have balance here. I mean, it's a huge beer. Let's be fair. I mean, I actually bought a growler of this for a harvest lunch in the middle of harvest, and my cellar crew was worthless for the afternoon.
So yeah, this particular beer is 9.5% alcohol. It wasn't designed to be part of the Anniversary blending program. This is something that was completely built by design, based on the Union Jack recipe, as you already stated, and it was just basically making an imperial version of that. I just decided this last year that we would offer it up to the winemakers. I actually thought they might reject it, but it was now part of the 15 blend. It's in there.
I think it's an uncomfortable fit.
I'm actually kind of glad you said that, because I was nervous about it this year, because we know that the aromatics in an IPA and a double IPA are the first things to fall out as the beer ages, and everybody's buying Anniversary to age. Most people would buy 3 or 4 bottles, maybe taste one, and then put the rest away and not touch it again for a year. So my fear was that we'd have something that was ready to drink out of the bottle and then would fall to pieces afterwards. Now, granted, it's only 5% of the blend.
Yeah, which isn't a big deal.
And so the first thing I did was go back to the lab and start blending the same blend with year-old Union Jack from our warm library, try to worst-case scenario and make sure it wasn't going to taste.
From your what library?
So we keep
warm or war?
Oh, warm.
Warm library?
Warm library. So we have one library we keep at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, one we keep at 45.
Really?
The one at 45 would be best case scenario if someone refrigerated their beer from day one to the finish. And those beers taste perfect 6 months after they're bottled.
Right.
Warm library.
So the reality library almost.
The reality
for the
library.
marketplace.
And 30 days in, you can taste a difference. 60 days, you definitely taste a difference. 90 days for most beers, especially IPAs, there's a distinctive difference. Now, whether you like that difference or not is,
So explain that difference. Put that difference into words in.
Yeah, so it's
briefly. We don't want to get too off.
Yeah, it's oxidation. So it's characters where bright fruit notes start turning to dry fruit notes.
So now here's a real interesting correlation to the wine business, right? You're saying oxidation, but how can something oxidate? Is that a word? Under under a crown cap, under a beer cap. I mean, that's the securest of all seals, right? So,
right. So you think of glass and a crown being impermeable, but there's a certain amount of oxygen that's picked up en route to the bottle.
Right.
And then there's a certain amount that, you know, they talk about oxygen ingress. So as the crown is sitting on this bottle, even though it's a pure seal and it's keeping carbonation in, there's osmotic pressures drawing
Total
oxygen
package
in.
oxygen,
Right.
is the term.
So it's one of those
It's
things.
interesting though, because there's a big argument in wine about screw caps. Will it age? It needs the air. Well, I guess a little bit of that.
I think there is some oxygen transfusion into the screw cap, but not as much as cork.
But there's so much CO2 in these beers. You'd think that oxygen would be.
But there still is. That's the bottom line.
That's kind of cool.
We know that there is.
We know very little is the reality.
And when we, you know, in wine, I know it's a completely different world, but when we package these beers, we're looking for levels of 10 parts per billion or less dissolved oxygen in the finished package, and yet that small, minute amount of oxygen still drives reactions that, in a sense, destroy the beer. But the thing that keeps that at bay is cold temperature. So if you keep your beer
Let's
cold,
not say destroy the beer. Let's say
okay, they change the beer. Sorry,
evolve the beer.
if you're a brewer, it's destroying. But it does. And so there are people there are many consumers who never taste brewery fresh beer and recognize those oxidized flavors as the key points of those beers. And that was a huge part of import beer's quality to the consumer versus their fresh local beer, because 6 months on the boat.
Didn't taste like it was when I was in Belgium, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. So anyway, IPAs, things with a lot of
So this would be a
hop
double
aroma.
IPA, would that be, or you call
Yeah.
it an imperial IPA?
Double
right?
IPA.
Same thing.
Yeah,
So
same
just
thing.
Going to the next level.
Right.
And a great beer.
Cheers.
I love my wife.